Ukraine. The pawn of NATO, Zionism, and the war for global control. Brothers and sisters, we are told every day by the media that Russia's war in Ukraine is nothing more than unprovoked aggression, the story of a dictator who wants more land. But this is a lie, a shallow narrative designed to blind the world. The truth is far deeper and far darker. This war did not begin in 2022. It began decades ago when the Soviet Union collapsed and the West saw an opportunity not for peace, but for domination. At the end of the Cold War, Russia was promised that NATO would not move 1 inch to the east. U.S. officials, including Secretary of State James Baker, gave that assurance in the early 1990s. Yet what followed? Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, the Baltic states, and more one by one swallowed into NATO. Then came US-backed color revolutions, designed to overthrow governments in Eastern Europe that leaned toward Moscow. Ukraine itself experienced this in 2004 with the Orange Revolution, and again in 2014 with the Maidan coup, where a democratically elected president was ousted with Western money, advisors, and intelligence backing. NATO did not just move eastward, it pushed Russia into a corner. Imagine if Russia placed nuclear weapons in Mexico or Canada, pointed straight at Washington. Would America stand by in silence? No country would. Ukraine was not chosen as a free nation's path. It was engineered as a pawn, a frontline state, a dagger aimed at the Russian border. And while the people of Ukraine cry out in suffering, the truth is that the so-called leaders of the West, including those in Europe, do not care about them. They see Ukrainians not as people, not as families, not as mothers and children, but as tools, as expendable pieces in their great game of power. To them, it is not about saving lives. It is about dominating Russia, tightening control, and proving their empire's strength. That is why Russia cannot be blamed in the way the West demands, because it was forced into a corner by powers that never once cared about peace or the Ukrainian people. And history proves this. These same European leaders who cry crocodile tears for Ukraine once carved up the Balkans in the 1990s, turning Bosnia and Kosovo into blood-soaked experiments of NATO power. They once looked the other way as Libya was bombed into ruin, as Syria was torn apart, as Iraq was invaded on lies. They claim to defend the weak, but every time smaller nations are caught in the gears of their empire, they are sacrificed for profit and domination. Europe itself is built on centuries of betrayal, colonies plundered, borders redrawn, and nations discarded once they served their purpose. Why would Ukraine be treated any differently? But NATO expansion is only part of the story. Behind these moves lies another shadow, Zionist influence, deeply intertwined with Western foreign policy. For decades, this power has shaped the wars of our time. Iraq destroyed on lies of weapons of mass destruction. Libya bombed back to the Stone Age, Syria torn apart, and Palestine under endless occupation. Always the same network, always the same interests. Media narratives are shaped to justify intervention, banks, and oligarchs' profit, while ordinary people pay with their lives. They thrive on chaos because chaos is profitable. And here too, Ukraine is simply another battlefield where suffering people are sacrificed, not protected. And here's where we must look at who leads Ukraine today. Volodymyr Zelensky sold to the world as a hero, a comedian turned defender of democracy. But the truth is more complicated. Zelensky was a television figure, elevated by the billionaire oligarch Ihor Kolomoisky, one of Ukraine's richest men, himself of Jewish descent and with vast influence over Ukrainian politics, business, and media. Zelensky himself is from a Jewish family. That alone is not the issue, but it is important because it explains why Western and Zionist networks embraced him so quickly. He was not an outsider stumbling into politics. He was groomed, financed, and marketed to become the perfect symbol. Behind Zelensky's rise was not just Kolomoisky's media empire, which broadcast his shows and shaped his image, but also Western financial interests eager for a pliant face to sell their agenda. Global investment firms, banking networks, and Western-backed NGOs quickly rallied around him, seeing in Zelensky a figure who could wear the mask of populism while carrying out the directives of Washington, Brussels, and Tel Aviv. He promised peace when elected, but once in office, he carried out the agenda of those who placed him there, continuing the crackdown on Russian language, pushing NATO membership, and opening Ukraine to Western militarization. While he plays the role of wartime leader, behind the curtain, Ukraine has been flooded with Western weapons, intelligence operatives, and private contractors. Billions of dollars flow through the country with no accountability, enriching elites while ordinary Ukrainians lose their homes, their sons, their future. And the leaders of Europe, the United States, and the so-called free world shed crocodile tears on television. But behind closed doors, they toast to more contracts, more weapons deals, more power. They do not care about the Ukrainian people. Their suffering is the cost of empire, and for them, that cost is acceptable. And Zelensky, presented as a savior, is nothing more than their frontman, their puppet, their actor playing the role written for him by those who only seek power. So let us be clear, Russia is not simply fighting Ukraine. It is fighting NATO's decades-long march eastward. It is fighting Western hegemony, the global system of control built on debt, deception, and military might. And it is fighting the Zionist-driven network that has thrived on endless wars. This is not about one country invading another. This is about the future of the world order itself, whether it will remain dominated by one empire of control, or whether it will shift toward a multipolar balance where nations can live free of foreign chains. And who pays the price? Not the bankers, not the politicians, not the oligarchs in their mansions or the elites who push for these wars. The ones who pay are the mothers who bury their children, the fathers who return to empty homes, the soldiers sent to die for agendas they never chose. We are told this is good versus evil, but it is not. It is empire versus sovereignty, control versus freedom. And when European leaders line up to wag their fingers at Russia, we must remember they are not defending Ukraine, they are defending their empire. They do not care about the lives lost in Mariupol or Donetsk. They care only about power and domination. We must awaken. We must see through the lies. Because if we do not, this same system will drag us from war to war until all of humanity is enslaved under their grip. This is not Russia versus Ukraine. This is the people of the world versus an empire. And until this truth is recognized, there will be no peace. But I say to you now, enough is enough. The world cannot afford to be blind any longer. Every lie must be exposed. Every puppet must be unmasked. Every empire built on blood must be confronted. If we remain silent, we hand our children a future of endless wars and chains. If we speak, if we rise, if we unite, then their empire crumbles. The choice is ours: submission or freedom, blind obedience or awakening, despair or resistance. Let this be the moment the world says, no more lies, no more wars, no more empire. The time has come to stand, to resist, and to reclaim the future.